In 1928, a woman named Eleanor was admitted to an asylum just like this one. Her diagnosis? Religious excitement. Her final years were spent behind these walls, and some people say she never really left. These decaying halls and peeling paint aren't just ruins. They're monuments to forgotten suffering. They were built with the promise of healing, but what they often delivered was pure horror. This brutal history has fueled generations of paranormal claims. Stories of shadow figures and disembodied voices echo in the emptiness. But are these hauntings just campfire stories, or are they the last desperate testimonies of the forgotten? Today, we're digging into the historical records and walking these same corridors to ask a critical question. What really happens when history and hauntings collide? Believe it or not, these institutions didn't start as places of terror. Many were born from a genuinely progressive idea in the 19th century called moral treatment. Visionaries like Dr. Thomas Kirkbride believed that beautiful architecture and serene landscapes could actually help heal the mind. The Kirkbride Plan called for sprawling, ornate buildings with plenty of sunlight and fresh air designed to be sanctuaries. But that compassionate vision quickly crumbled. Chronic underfunding and an overwhelming flood of patients turned these sanctuaries into grim warehouses. The Trans-Allegheny Lunatic Asylum in West Virginia, for instance, was designed for 250 people, but was crammed with over 2,400 by the 1950s. Overcrowding led to unsanitary conditions, violence, and a swift return to the very cruelty moral treatment was meant to fix. Patients were subjected to hours and restraints, and neglect became the norm, and the dream of healing had become a nightmare of confinement. Every corner of these buildings tells a story. What were supposed to be restful patient wards became scenes of absolute chaos. And the sheer number of people confined to small spaces bred desperation and violence. But the history gets even darker when you step into the treatment rooms. This is where controversial procedures were performed in the name of a cure. Ice baths, electroshock therapy, and most infamously, the lobotomy were common. Overwhelmed and desperate, doctors saw these brutal interventions as a quick way to manage unruly patients. And at places like Trans-Allegheny, a staggering number of these procedures were performed, with one doctor, Walter Freeman, conducting hundreds of lobotomies across West Virginia. These surgeries didn't just sever parts of the brain. They severed a person's identity, their very soul. The goal was to silence the illness, but all too often it silenced the person entirely. And for those who died within these walls, whether from disease, neglect, or the treatments themselves, dignity was a rare luxury. Their stories often ended in unmarked graves, or in some cases their bodies were sent to medical schools for study, a final anonymous contribution. When you hear these historical truths, the paranormal claims start to make a chilling kind of sense. If you believe the stories of the forgotten deserve to be heard, take a moment to subscribe for more investigations into the shadows of our history. This is where the line between fact and folklore begins to blur. The history is documented, but what about the hauntings? At Pennhurst State School, a place notorious for its horrific patient abuse, investigators and visitors report hearing disembodied voices and feeling the touch of an unseen hand. At Trans-Allegheny, people on ghost tours claim to see shadow figures and hear unexplained screams in the halls where so much suffering took place. One of the most well-known spirits is said to be a little girl named Lily, who was supposedly born inside the Trans-Allegheny Asylum and died there from pneumonia, never knowing the outside world. Visitors leave toys in what is believed to be her room and have sworn they've seen them move on their own. So what do you think? When a strange voice is recorded on an EVP recorder in an old treatment room, is it just radio interference? Or is it an echo of a person who was once subjected to horrors we can barely imagine? These paranormal accounts, whether you believe them or not, have become one of the only ways for stories of these forgotten patients to be told. The buildings may be decaying, but the memories of what happened here is very much alive. The history of these asylums is a profound tragedy. They stand as a solemn reminder of a time when society chose to lock away its most vulnerable citizens. The question of whether they are haunted by spirits is something you have to answer for yourself. But there's no question that they are haunted by their history. The pain, the suffering, and the injustice that occurred within these walls have left an undeniable stain. And perhaps the ghostly whispers and fleeting apparitions aren't just a legend, but a legacy. The final testimony of thousands of forgotten souls still asking us to remember them. And that's definitely something to think about. Y'all have a good night. Thanks for listening.